Hello and happy Easter to all our viewers. Welcome to the latest edition of the Red Pilled Fiction Factory. Today's guest comes from Pittsburgh, PA, where there was a shooting yesterday, but he's fine. His name is Schuyler, or Sky is easier. I don't know how you pronounce Schuyler. Hernstrom, which tells a story in itself. And his book is a collection of short stories called Thune's Vision, a collection which came out some time ago but is now being re-put together with a few new editions, I believe, and we'll come up to that in a minute. Sky, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Very well. Very hot down here in Mexico, where I am.
I love the timbers behind you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
There's some Spanish lord from Cordova or something.
I wish. It is an old house.
Modern version.
Yeah, it is an old house, but and not the lord that I wanted to be when I was little. Now I'm going to read your bio, and then we're going to dissect it because it's one of the more fascinating bios
Sure.
that we've got. I picked it up off the internet somewhere. It says Schuyler. How do you pronounce it, first of all?
Oh, Schuyler.
Schuyler Hernstrom spent a great deal of his youth reading and rereading the works of Jack Vance and Robert E. Howard. After 2 enlistments in the army, I presume, an education and many years abroad, he finally found himself ready to make his own contribution to his favorite genres, fantasy and science fiction. His work reflects his love of the written word as well as an abiding interest in the weird and the spectacular. He has been a paratrooper, sailor, janitor, bouncer in Roppongi, which for those who don't know is a notorious Japanese Tokyo night destination, librarian, and a dozen other things, bringing a worldwide wise slant to his tales of the fantastic. If you enjoy your bloody action couched in graceful prose and tinted with sadness for lost epochs, then perhaps you will enjoy his work. So tell us where you're from originally, Sky, and your early life, let's say.
Sure. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, PA, and 2 wonderful parents. Both of them very literary. There's just a house full of books, and my dad in particular was very much into fantasy and science fiction, and I've told the story before. There's a gentleman named P. Schuyler Miller who was sort of a luminary in the weird fiction scene back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and he, participated in that fanzine culture and was a bibliographer for Robert E. Howard and corresponded with all those authors, and he wrote a couple pieces himself. He worked with my dad. He was a lot older than my dad, but they worked at a place called Fisher Scientific. And my dad was very taken with them. They were really good friends. And that I'm named for him. So
very good.
Like pulp royalty there. But he passed away either the year I was born or the year after.
So it's not a Scandinavian name.
No, Schuyler itself is I understand it, it's Dutch, and Hernstrom is a Scandinavian name. That's Norwegian,
right?
And that gets pretty complicated because my dad was adopted, but I have Danish and Swedish in the family, so it doesn't feel too bad. Like if you were I look it's. In some ways look Scandinavian, so it all worked out.
Yeah, and the book, the stories, if I didn't know your background and I had to guess your origins, I would be definitely going for Hyperborea or whatever it's called, the North of Europe.
Maybe some bastard between Samaria and the Vanir or something. Yeah, but that all from Howard. And so had a blast growing up, and talked about this stuff before. I think growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was a sort of a unique time in pop culture, and a lot of the stuff left a very, very strong impression on people that were there. And specifically, like, there was a lot of cool stuff happening. Like when I was a kid, I had Conan comics. We could drive down the street and see vans with barbarian murals on them, and and getting a little bit older, is heavy metal and all that stuff. And it was just I think um a bit, and everything gets popped into the big cauldron and starts to stew and mix together. And it was just cool. And then, in the 60s and 70s, in the paperbacks, everybody was reprinting all the pulps and everything else. So it was just like you go to a bookstore and there was just a lot of cool stuff, and but all that stuff is definitely definitely my influences and all that, and a lot of guys my age. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't think we know how good we had it at the time.
No, everyone, yeah, I certainly took it for granted,
and
yeah.
it's only now we're looking back, and John Mollison, the other guy we had on, that you also know, referred to this.
Fantastic guy.
And now we're in a cultural desert. There's no question about it, and you have to really look hard to find anything of value. If you're lucky, you'll find something. But in those days, it was there, but we kind of took it for granted, expecting it to continue. And of course,
yeah, I guess we can't be blamed too much. Since Gilgamesh and before, the life revolves around stories, and you would never think there would be a dearth of good stories. There's gajillions of people on the earth, and everyone likes stories, and it's kind of bizarre.
Well, this is effectively, it's been suppressed, hasn't it, in our age? But anyway, go on. So you go into school you've got this environment of the heavy metal and the comics that you're reading, and that you weren't writing anything then, or thinking of writing. It was
no, it's like you always think, oh, I'm gonna do it someday. You know what I mean? Like I've always, not so much in the last couple of years, more or less from family, just as far as spare time goes. But I've always been a pretty voracious reader, and going to the public library, or just picking up random things out of my parents' collections of books, and just always just trying to devour everything. And so the you always think, well, someday I'll write a book, what I mean, and but never. I took after I got out of high school, I was at university for, I don't know, a year, and like I took a creative writing course, and I think that put things off by probably 10 or 15 years. You know what I mean?
Explain. Obviously, the idea of a creative writing course is to encourage you and get you.
Yeah, no, it scared me straight for a while. So and then I went into the military, went into the Navy, was stationed overseas on a ship out of Yokosuka, Japan. Then I left the Navy and stayed abroad and lived in Japan for a while. Came back. What's that?
You're going too fast. That was when you were a bouncer in Roppongi, was it?
Yeah. that
must have been quite something.
Yeah, it's again, like it's funny we're talking about taking all the stuff for granted. You do stuff like that and you're 22, you're 23, you're like, well, this is normal, this is just what people do. You're not thinking about it. But just working in a couple of those big clubs that had a lot of foreigners and stuff. And I I feel sheepish talking about it, because when you say bouncer, you imagine, Mortal Kombat every night, and getting into all sorts of fights, and there
But this
really
is
just
Japan. Yeah.
wasn't a ton of that stuff going on. The craziest thing I saw, the guy that was managing the club was this big black guy. He was probably in his 30s or 40s, which at the time he seemed like a wise tribal elder. Um, but he was a mountain of a man. He was giant. And he managed the club, and he wore these cool shades and just sort of mingled and did everything. And he was a giant guy. And I don't know what happened, but he had a couple too many one night, and the club stayed open till 5, 6 in the morning at least. And he had too many that night, and something had rubbed him the wrong way, and he ended up getting into a kerfuffle with these Japanese guys. And I'm not talking like movie Yakuza guys. I just mean a bunch of Japanese kids that were at the club. And it was this bizarre spectacle. I come around the corner and you have this gigantic man, and there's like all these Japanese men like crawling all over him, and they can't do anything to him, and he's maybe a little too drunk, or he can't deal with them. So there's these guys crawling all over him, and they're screaming these like
Banzai.
Japanese people are the Japanese are very these stereotypes that everyone knows. They're very reserved. They're not prone to public displays of emotion. But like, this was a context now where they were past the line. They had gone through the veil. So they were screaming, and they were just like, it was like these shrill battle cries that, and they're attacking this guy, and he's like, and I came around the corner, and like, oh my God, So me and a couple of the other guys, we just went and picked up we just grabbed the Japanese guys and gingerly just carried them out, and just other guys were trying to calm the manager down. And it was just this giant shit show. And Japan is not a litigious society. They don't sue each other constantly. I don't even know how, if someone makes a defective, air conditioner, it blows up. I have no idea what happens over there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So and like, I knew this guy, this friend of mine, who he was like an amateur wrestler, and he went on like this amateur wrestling circuit in Japan. And they're doing their thing, and they're kayfabe, and this Japanese wrestler, I guess he was a heel or something, but he threw a folding table out into the audience, and it like creams some guy, just blows him away.
Oh, yeah.
And like, the guy's gonna need stitches. And my friend, an American, and a couple of the other Americans were like, oh my God, they're gonna get sued. They're gonna get sued. Oh my God, someone's gonna get sued. And it was just, that was not a thing, you know what I mean? So like, someday I'll be like, I don't even know where I look it up, but like, what the hell happens when something like that happens over there? I have no idea. But it was to try to tie it back to the writing and whatnot. It was very, very stimulating, and any expat, and you're an expat right now.
Yeah.
So it's very, very stimulating living in not your birthland. Visiting is always very fun.
Yeah.
Visiting is exciting. Visiting is, I want to see this, I want to see that. When I was in the Navy, I went all over the Pacific Rim, and I saw Hong Kong 7 or 8 times, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and on down to Australia. And like, you're visiting, and you're like, and this is pre-internet too. So I'm like, I'm in Hong Kong. What the hell do I do? So I get a guidebook, and I plan out like I get on the public train, and in the course of one day, Hong Kong is obviously not large. I was able to visit like all these shrines in one day. Just started at and work my way through all these major shrines. And like all that spectacle gets absorbed.
Yeah,
And
sure. I can see how this translates into material for fantasy writing and sword and
yeah,
sorcery, because
well, not to and so like I go to a shrine and it's obviously this tripped out awesome experience, and then but somebody else lives there, and it's if that person were to go to a Catholic church, they'd be like, whoa,
yeah,
what is on with this? You know what I mean? So you keep that in mind, because when you're putting characters in situations, you have to put them in appropriate context and give them appropriate reactions, and then you're also trying to put the reader in a you know what I mean, elicit put visuals and things in the reader's mind. And so there's sort of a dance there. But I can remember just sitting there. I was 19, 20 years old, just looking at no one wanted to do this with me because it was pretty nerdy at the time. I was just gonna wait around to the board. But seeing a place with like an open roof and all these black beams, these rafters, and all the incense snaking through on this humid day in Hong Kong, which has an incredibly strong scent palette, because you
yeah,
have bay, and
the
you have
harbor,
all
yeah,
these markets and things like that, and and all the traffic and everything, and then all this, these hundreds of sticks of incense burning, and all that gets filed away, and you don't go after it specifically, but it comes out,
yeah. No,
hopefully when you
superb.
need it.
Much better than being stuck in a writing course in
Yeah, yeah.
Pennsylvania or wherever it was. And what about the paratrooping then? That the Navy doesn't paratroop as far as I.
No, like the SEALs do that, but I
Okay.
couldn't even make it as an Eagle Scout, so I'm no SEAL. After I lived in Japan for a while, I came back to the States, and I just I always I just wanted to give it a try, and wanted to have a different sort of military experience, so I joined the Army,
Right.
and there then all sorts of shenanigans and things ensue. But I just wanted to be a soldier. I didn't When I was in the Navy, I was an intelligence analyst on board
Okay.
ship, and by contrast, when I joined the Army, I just wanted to be a soldier.
Basic. Yeah,
I
grunt.
just wanted to, I wanted to run around in the woods with a gun
Yeah.
and play games with the other boys. I didn't want to do anything weird.
Yeah.
And it gave the recruiters and the people that process you, that gave them fits, because they wanted to put me in intel and all this other stuff. And it's just like, man, I did that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it again.
Yeah. How old
You
were
know,
you then when you re-enlisted?
I was about 26.
Okay. And had you been traveling on a red pill direction since childhood, or did the military and the Navy instill it in you, or you
I
just
think
found
I
your own
think
way?
I think the Navy and the military in general were a good tonic to sort of some of the things that you might pick up in university that may
Yeah.
not correspond to reality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely. And it also helps when you're in the military, or you just meet all sorts of people, you know what I mean? Like you meet all sorts of people with all sorts of different experiences, and uh and you see a lot of things that you don't expect, and your horizons get broadened very much. And I think at least in that, and for me anyway, less susceptible to sort of very narrow ideologies, and very sort of um things that aren't necessarily things that would not make sense compared to what I've seen,
Hmm.
with my eyes.
Yeah.
And yep, go ahead.
No, very good.
Yeah.
In a way, it should be a compulsory ritual for
Well,
the
certainly a lot of
modern
other.
male to do some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, everyone needs to,
Write a
you know, get
passage.
outside their bubble and consider other things, and you know, as much real life as you can experience without exposing yourself to unnecessary risk or injury.
Yeah.
You know.
So you're in your late 20s.
Mhm.
I presume you came out of the army around then, and did you go straight into you'd resolved by this point to write a book, or you went into some other profession?
Yeah, and I was just putzing around, working different things, and a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who I met, a dear friend of mine who I met via sort of games, miniature games, and D&D and stuff like that. He suggested that I write short fiction. He said, "Let's just write some short fiction." And it was like a bulb went off, and it just started from there because it's very, it was very stupid of me, but like, you know, I grew up reading short fiction. You know, I grew up reading all these anthologies and all these collections, and I love short fiction, and especially back then, like, you know, talked about this, like Jack Vance, one of my all-time favorite authors. You know, he would write a novel, and you know, it'd be like 150, 200, 300, you know, I mean, like it would be 180 pages or something like that. Like, so this is the beginning of, this is the, it's one of the Demon Prince novels. And in this series of novels, the protagonist is trying, there are 5 novels, in each one, the protagonist hunts down and kills a sort of you know, planetary crime lord. And each one, he has a specific target, and he goes through it. And taken as a whole, these are just, they're just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. This book is 159 pages. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's no fat in this thing. There's nothing you need to trim. There's no point where you're like, oh, let me just get through this part, you know. And it's not to say that it moves at a breakneck pace, or there's no space to breathe. No, it all works perfectly, and it all works beautifully. But you know, I was lionizing the 80s a bit, but that's when you saw that change in publishing, when they brought out the fantasy door stoppers, you know, the big,
Yeah.
300, you know, 600, 500 pages. And you know, but in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with wanting to get stuck into a 500-page fantasy novel, you know what I mean? But for my purposes, like, you know, the love and doom per pound ratio is going to be a lot heavier in
Yeah.
this, you know.
Yeah.
And like,
There's always room for the. Go on. Sorry.
oh, no, just so you know, it was just, you know, I think seeing what was happening, and or subconsciously seeing what was happening, you know, I think like, well, someday I'm going to have to write a giant novel. You know what I mean? That's just what you do now. And my friend sort of uncorked that, and so I just started writing a lot of short fiction, and I've just had an absolute blast doing it, because it's, you know, it's very liberating. I sit down and I just write a story as long as it needs to be, and you know, sort of get my kicks that way. And it's been fantastic. And you know, there's so much potential, and so much things you can do, and so in these short pieces. And you know what I mean, sort of get it on there, and explore and move around, and get out what, and you know, how things end is so important. And you know, you really get just maximum impact, maximum punch from a lot of these pieces. You know, it's worked out. It's been very, very, very satisfying. And you know, having said that, I'm working on a novel now, and I'm working, but after these couple years now, it feels very organic. You know, I started the piece I'm working on now without necessarily thinking, oh, I'm going to start a novel, but things rolling around, I get them on paper, and then I step back and look at it and like, I'm going to need a novel length to tease all this out. I'm going to need a novel length to make this all make sense. So I'm writing a novel. But it's very organic and feels right, which is important to me. Like, all this stuff is about it's not about me as a writer. It's not about my vision. It's not about my deftness with the prose or anything like that. This is about the feelings and the what you can evoke and how you can affect and what you can feel. And I'm trying to work these things on myself. I'm trying to tease these things out of myself and affect myself. And it's been very, very rewarding and lucky to a certain degree that sometimes it has similar effects on other people, and that
Well, yeah,
then
that's what it's
then
all
you get
about.
get that awesome connection, and it's
Yeah.
very, it takes you right back to the campfire and telling these stories. It's just been really, really cool.
And you were getting published in, is it Searsova or some
Here's
magazine?
over, yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
okay, I'm not familiar with it, but obviously it's very respected within the industry. And you were getting published almost from the start, were you, or did it take
Yeah,
a
I
while?
mean, like, the first piece I sent out was this sort of ridiculous Vancian riff that got picked up in this thing called Lore magazine, which is since defunct, but it was like a weird fiction magazine. And I got a piece in Heroic Fantasy Quarterly, which is a really cool place to just get some free, just read it online. It's really groovy. Um, and then Kursova comes around, and I had been reading the blog of this gentleman, Jeffro Johnson, who put out this, oh, Kursova magazine's coming. And I emailed Kursova and sent him one of my pieces, Alex, and he was into it, and then that just sort of kicked off from there. So it's funny, it was a very, very prolific period for me. I hadn't had my children yet.
Right,
So I was just
snapping them out.
yeah, I was just churning them out. And that's how Thune's Vision came together, because
Right.
it was a very, very productive period. And that there was, I sort of ran through all the markets real quick, what I mean? Because it's just the consumption patterns and everything else and whatever else you want to put into it. But back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, there was, dozens of places
Yeah,
to publish whatever, but not
not
so
so
much
much.
now.
No, no. Right, before we go on, I'm going to read a spiel that I found somewhere on the internet about Thune's Vision to give the listener an idea. It says, in the tradition of authors like Jack Vance, who you've already referenced, and Robert E. Howard, who everyone who comes on this show seems to reference, comes an anthology of wonder, adventure, fantasy, and the strange. Skylar and the strange. Skylar Hernstrom brings fantasy short fiction back to its roots. Each story is a paean to the genre from the days when lurid paperbacks called us from rickety spinner racks. Burroughs reprints alongside Moorcock and Jakes and many others. This is a collection to savor on a lazy afternoon, a trip into the weird and heroic. Sometimes wry, sometimes brutal, and always entertaining. Grim warlords and dark prophecy, selfish wizards and beautiful women, strange aliens and fatal hubris, all contained within its pages. This anthology will delight the connoisseur who prefers an older vintage and makes no apology. In the fantasy genre, what was old is new again. So get in your airbrushed van and buckle up. You are going on a wild trip. I was fascinated by that because it seemed my book is a retro thriller, if you like. It's going back,
Yeah.
trying to salvage the virtues, the many virtues of the earlier style thriller, and in the face of the modern market and critics and everything. And it seems like you're doing a parallel exercise, but with science fiction stroke fantasy. That's something that you would identify with then, is it? And was it
Absolutely, yeah.
a conscious
Yeah,
decision?
and absolutely. And there's a paradox there. There's a duality, like, and I would assume this also speaks to your work. Um, we're not doing pastiche or homage.
Yeah.
This is like you wrote the story that you wanted to write. It came organically from
Yep.
you. You know, like it's as if like if I were to pick some obscure genre, well, obscure to us, obscure to me, like I guess the Chinese civilization produced these detective novels, you know, a long time before anyone else was producing detective novels. I think the character was a judge. So I could study that. I could study that um, and pore over every device, every word, and then try to emulate that as a sort of artificial exercise. And it might be entertaining, it might be not be, but this isn't what I'm doing. And it's like what you said, not what you're doing. You know, like the this is organic. This is an organic product that came from the well, and
Yep.
we're not trying to I'm not like have some
It's not
funky
forced.
70s guy costume that I'm strutting around in, like, oh,
No.
this is so cool, I'm so retro. Like this is what I want to make, and this is what comes when I decide to sit down and make something. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I
Yeah,
I,
like
I
like
totally agree. I partly ascribe it to the fact that we grew up with this
sure.
environment, and we appreciate, learn. That's how we learn. In my
Mhm,
case, more thrillers than your science fiction.
mhm.
But also, I think they were superior products. I think the
Yeah,
modern, I don't know so much about science fiction and fantasy, but certainly in the thriller genre, there are these people churning out books almost every 6 weeks, it seems. They must have teams of writers, or maybe they don't, because really they've just got a format. The guy goes into a new town, he meets a
yeah.
bad guy, he beats him up, he meets a good guy. It's very routine. There's no descriptive, there's no
Hmm.
power to the language. It could almost be done by a computer, and probably.
Yeah,
And I'm certain that what's happening now is a kind of conscious rebellion against this
yeah,
sterility, uh,
sure.
and
Yeah,
trying to resurrect something of eternal, more long-lasting value anyway, and more
yeah. And
substantial. I see meat on a bone, really, rather than just a
yeah,
bone.
and the prospects are good because you got to remember that insurgents win by not quitting.
That's it. Yeah,
You
we've
know,
got a
and
lot going for
like
us.
there are people a lot smarter than me that have analyzed and are looking at what's happening in publishing, whatever particular genre you like, and I don't, you know, but when we sit down and if we just make you just make something that's true to yourself, you've won. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like you've won. And whatever you make is going to endure past you, and it's just a very sort of human and satisfying endeavor. You know what I mean?
Well, it certainly comes across in the book. We're going to move on to the sort of details and nitty-gritty of it now. How many stories are there? About 9, I guess.
Let me see. I have the old edition.
Okay. Yeah, because the old edition had
Neil,
fewer stories, I think, and the new one
yeah,
has about 9 or 10, I think.
Neil, my publisher, I haven't mentioned yet, but this is oh, so this is Thune's Vision. This is the original sort of edition, and I for lack of other markets or ideas, self-published it on Amazon. Um, a gentleman I know started an imprint, and I knew that I could sort of redo this and give it the sort of the treatment that I think it deserves in the end. So sent it his way, and that's what the Kickstarter is all about. The second edition of this. This for the original edition has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories,
Hmm.
and in the newer one it will have these 5 stories, 2 additional short pieces. One is the piece from Lore magazine that was sort of like lost in the archive. Another's a piece, sort of a strange piece that I did that doesn't fit anywhere. Put it in there. It's a very strange piece. It's about an experience I had at a bus stop. And, I normally don't write that type of thing. So it's an interesting sort of palate cleanser, if you will.
Okay.
And the final big drum roll here it comes is there will be an additional novella in this thing, and this novella is another chapter in the story of these two Gonzo characters I made up named Mortu and Kairos.
Yes, who are great
And
little characters.
yeah, it was just so much fun. So this thing will be buffed out. It'll be, it's
Okay.
getting the professional typesetting and copy editing treatment that in retrospect, when I look at this first edition, I'm slightly embarrassed it didn't get anything.
Don't
So,
worry.
but
We all start somewhere.
yeah, exactly.
I've got a
It's
few.
a great little thing.
I'm going to read some excerpts. There's a to give the listener an idea. The Black Knight story features a guy who declares, the weeping of widows is my lullaby. The crows fat with the flesh of the slain are my companions. And he's a guy who's described as a veteran of 1,000 duels. Just to give flavor. Now that we come on to Athan and the priestess, and we have Athan has to go against a monster, basically monstrous enemy. Belthi advanced behind his shield, sword held aloft. Athan gave ground, studying his foe. He had never fought a man in so much armor before. In his head, he began the animal calculations of the natural fighter. He saw every one of Belthi's movements in minute detail, a crystal clarity honed by the threat of death. He watched without watching, his attention spread evenly to his whole opponent before him, eyes resting around the shifting center. His subconscious factored everything, including his own movements, as his hard body moved, sometimes in response, sometimes to provoke a response. The captain essayed the first strike, confident in his thick broadsword and heavy armor. The blade whistled harmlessly past. That is the best piece of opening of a fight I've read. And I can only imagine you've had, maybe it was your days as a bouncer, but did you do any martial arts or anything?
Yeah, I've putzed around with a lot. Like I did I've trained a little bit with Muay Thai in this gym that used to be near my a house I had in East Pittsburgh. Did that when I was in high school. I was lucky enough, there was near to me a studio that taught Pencak Silat, which is an Indonesian martial art. And I did boxing at the Y for a little bit when I was a kid. But yeah, like that's like it's all in the mix. You know what I mean? Like someone yelling at you, like you're sparring with someone and there's an older guy yelling at you what you're doing wrong, and you know what I mean? It all gets absorbed. And like the things that focusing on one thing or coming into something with this preconception of how it's going to go, and then learning that you were really really wrong. So like I'm certainly my hands are not registered deadly weapons,
No.
not at City Hall or anywhere else. However,
but
training.
Your pen is. No, I think
he's mighty, I guess. But all that stuff gets in the mix. All that stuff gets filed away, and then gets to come out when you need it, if you're lucky.
Well, you don't use many words there, but the ones you use are just absolutely perfect for the frame that we're talking about, and it works terrifically well and gives a brilliant insight into how it feels. In the ecology of the unicorn, the sorcerer a sorcerer has reached the end of his days, and this is a description of aging, really, and it's a quite touching piece. The sorcerer had already exhausted all of the known tricks to extend his life through the long centuries necessary to master his craft. He had fashioned hourglasses that turned hours into months. He had imbibed revitalizing tonics made from dew gathered from the world's first morning. Pacts made with ill-tempered things from plains of smoke and noise had long since expired. The harvester's arrival was imminent. Malathikos' life dipped like a stalk of wheat, heavy in its fullness and awaiting the scythe. So we can see that from brutal combat to a rather insightful analysis of aging and death. And then finally, the Saga of Adolwulf, which is a novella that's sort of the anchor of the collection. It stands out from amongst the stories. And another fight scene. The madness came fully now, chest heaving, howl of rage and grief burning his throat. He spun and hacked. He's in the middle of a battlefield, so he's not fighting one person. An arm off here, a leg above the knee there, a head. The loss of his shield meant he dare not stay still. Blades found him, cutting his arms and testing the arm on his back. But all who touched him fell under his sword. Adolwulf was the embodiment of the world as it was, death without mercy, life without salvation, a world where one survived only by depriving another of life. Vengeance and greed, hunger and darkness, a world where with few exceptions only women grew old, and not many at that. Death and life, one inevitable as a mountain and the other as fleeting as a song in the wind. There justice came only at the point of a spear, and peace was a madman's dream. Fantastic.
We were like, I talk a lot about Robert E. Howard, and but it's the same thing about our discussion about homage. Howard's definitely an influence, but that's what came out there is an organic thing, and it's that particular passage especially was propelled by we live in a very sort of we live in a culture where everyone's expected to provide and construct their own identity, whereas we used to live in cultures where everything was established and
the culture and the group provided.
Yeah, exactly. So one option right now among thousands is where people enjoy the symbols and the runes and about like Norse paganism and things like that. And I'm certainly not one to tell anyone that they shouldn't wear a Thor's hammer or whatever they want to do. That is never be my goal or anything like that. But what I wanted to try to do, especially with passages like that, was try to really put myself in it's hard to even imagine what living in the Dark Ages would have been like.
Yeah.
If someone comes right now and parks their truck on my lawn, I'm going to call the cops.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, like people have cameras all over their house. They're we live, and violence is a constant reality, and it never really goes away. But you can go a very long time in our lives and not necessarily be touched by it, and it would be an extremely foreign and for lucky people, I should say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Certainly, the rest of the world isn't necessarily like that. And if violence does intrude on your life, and it's an incredibly shocking, transgressive, gut-wrenching experience, and if we go back to other periods in human history, it was, at any moment, someone who was stronger than you could come and menace you, and like it's just that's a form that's terror. That's like it's hard to even put your head in there. So you work really hard to get your head in that space and try to properly contextualize it, and think about the pre-Christian world, where they're these monotheistic religions, you know what I mean, very much have made an attempt, all of them, to humanize and to create structures and institutions, in mental space that mitigate and stop violence, and all this other stuff, and none of that was there at that time.
No.
So there was Lindisfarne, guys getting off the beach, getting off their
Yeah.
boats and going up and just slaughtering,
Yeah, it
just
wasn't
murdering.
just you either. It was you, your family, your
Yeah, yeah. And then
descendants
like,
forever,
stealing,
and there
stealing
was no
people into
fallback.
slavery.
There was
Yeah.
no courts or anything. So yes, I fully appreciate it, and you certainly with extracts like that bring it into the fore. I think if there was a passage that was ever the embodiment of the red-pilled sort of
Yeah, yeah, like just like
I think that's it. We understand
reality. Yeah.
it's very fragile and has, it's not automatic and nothing can be taken
No.
for granted. And we do live in a very privileged time, which is probably going to end within our lifetime. And it brings it all together in super. And recommend the book for those messages alone, but for the rest as well. Now, before we go, you come across a guy called Neil Durando, who's been in touch with me as well, who seems to me like you should be writing, for one thing. Neil, if you're watching this, you should be writing your own novels, because even your emails are quality.
Yeah, yeah.
What's his role in getting this published? The Kickstarter process, maybe, because I'm sure a lot of other people would be interested to hear what you're doing to get this going together.
Yeah, absolutely. I met Neil a couple of years ago, and he lives. I guess it's not a secret or something, but he is headquartered in France, and
Okay.
Neil's very much an interesting character. Just sort of somebody that's walked out of an interwar novel with all sorts of mysterious connections and origins, and yeah, very, very fascinating. And being from the military and a lot of other things, I have a very, very much a wolf pack mentality where I like being around people that are smarter than me, people that are stronger than me. You know what I mean? I like to try to level up that way. And Neil has had a couple interesting careers, but he worked for a time in publishing in New York, like proper real publishing in New York, and came up under Gordon Lish. And he's got the chops. He it is very, very lucky for me to run into him, because my process is so organic. It's perhaps too organic, you know what I mean, in terms of like, how am I going to stretch? How am I going to improve? And like, you need some help. You need a sensei. You need something. So, whereas I just read something and go, oh, that made me feel like this. It's great. Neil's causing, Neil helps you understand the mechanism and the way things are working and why things are working or why things aren't working. So he's a really great editor for me. And this knowledge is out there, but it's hard to find, and it's especially hard to find in a context that doesn't make you want to run and jump out of the nearest window. So like I'm not into being a writer as such. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to have that be, it's hard to explain. But Neil, I can connect with Neil, and we can look at it as like a craft in a way that I haven't been able to before.
Right.
So it's been very, very, very rewarding. And he started Pylon Press. And so he's connected with a bunch of other guys like that, the aforementioned handsome devil John Mollison, and like Gaming Titan, and all around roustabout Jeffro Johnson,
who's
so
also been mentioned on this
sort
program.
of like he's running a salon, and like his cleavage is bringing all the worst hussars into the salon. You know what I mean? Like it is just it's really cool, and it's very much like you feel like you're on like a pirate ship or something, because you know the sort of the things that might annoy us or might distract us actually do create a tremendous amount of opportunity. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So Pilot Press is sort of setting itself up to take advantage of these opportunities, because with the state of things like publishing and I'm not any kind of industry expert. I think people toss around stuff a little too easily, but regardless, my spidey sense tells me that there's money on the table. People are hungering for stories
Yep.
and entertainment that doesn't look down on them or insult them or attempt to shape things in a non-organic fashion. So
Yeah.
Pilot Press is getting really well positioned to make some big moves on that. And there's talking him up. I should also mention my buddy Dave at DMR Books. He's got a collection of my stuff that is pretty cool. These are like most of the stories that were in that Kursova magazine.
Okay.
And a fresh one I did just for that collection. He's a great guy. So I mean, like right off the gate, without really trying all that hard, just goofing off online and talking to people, there's actually a lot of stuff going on. And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's all very encouraging.
Yeah,
Even
yeah,
a
it
year
is.
ago or something, this
Like
stuff didn't exist.
Dave is a sword and sorcery and fantasy aficionado, and really juiced into the metal scene and that whole milieu is wonderful. And then Neil pops up out of nowhere, some guy that has just this incredible intellect and a lot of ability, and he's just setting a ladder in front of the wall and motioning for this line of rogues and knuckleheads to run up and run over that ladder. So it's just, and like the Kursova magazine's still going. It's very exciting.
Explain a little bit the Kickstarter process to us ignorants that don't understand it. It's a crowdfunding system.
And some sort of crowdfunding platform. And Pilot Press put up the Thunes edition, Thunes Vision Second Edition, and it's the initial target was I think $5,000, and it's made up that, and it's in the, I don't know how much it is. I'll look it up, but like it's over that. It's like over $6,000 I think now, and so that all that money pays for all the sort of professional services necessary to make the proper book, like all the copy editing and typesetting and stuff like that. And so, and it's really cool opportunity just sort of to get on the scene and
yeah,
be visible,
play your part, even if you're not a writer, for example, and you want to
exactly. And it's been fantastic. And like, over the years I've got it'll be a bummer someday if I get big enough to the point where like I can't respond to everybody that contacts me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if like it's fun to be like this.
Not that important. Yeah, I agree.
but like I just had like cool interactions with so many people.
I agree. Yeah, I'm having a lot at the moment. And so you've got the novel lined up. Is it going to be as thick as a doorstop like Game of Thrones and stuff, or is it?
No. I'll just keep teasing it for years and years and years and just sort of fade away. No, I couldn't say how long it's going to be, but it will not be a giant door stopper because I just don't have that kind of stuff in me.
And is it? Can you give us a teaser as to the
Sure. What I wanted to do with the novel was the protagonist is a sort of a mercenary barbarian archetype, and he's been dragooned into working for a particular sorcerer who is involved with a conclave of other sorcerers, and his employer is on a quest to find some information. Now, this is all very vague, but so the mercenary barbarian is an unwilling participant in this giant Byzantine network of schemes that these sorcerers are putting over on one another. So it's you got a little bit of like a sort of a fish out of water, and these sorcerers, it's very much in the mold of a Dying Earth type story from the aforementioned Jack Vance. That these sorcerers are immensely powerful. You know, they'll have a, you know, in a whole city, they'll have their tower and their fortress and a whole city around them to take care of their needs. And our hero is thrust into all this and has to make a decision and many decisions about where his loyalties lie and how to navigate and survive in this environment of
And
a
how
lot
far
of extremeness.
how far are you into the books?
I think I've got about 10,000 words down. And as interesting for me, like I've had to grow up and put on my big boy pants and start actually making like I had enough characters to this point. I'm like I had to make a list of them all. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. So we're rapidly approaching the point where it's like homework. But you know, so I'm putting the work in and investing the time and the energy to make sure that this to really kind of stretch and provide some pretty immense spectacles and pretty really interesting plot. You know that you know hopefully a reader will get invested in and really want to know what the hell happens to all these people. It's very very fun to write immensely powerful wizards
Yeah.
because they can you know maybe be capable of very much, but have their own very pronounced weaknesses. You
You've
know.
got to, otherwise you never win, would you? No.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very like the story Ecology, the unicorn with that sorcerer trying to defeat mortality, you know,
Yeah, that was very good.
defeat death. A lot of those types of things that you know will be in this novel in terms of like just the strangeness and the all the weird aspects to the world that these guys live in. Like I had a lot of fun with that because the sorcerer Malefixos ends up in the Fey lands, and
Yes.
you know there's just so much you can invent, and it's very 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 fun. Like the he's being warned against further action by this hussar who tells him that you know the wizards in the tree are gonna look up everything they can about you, and they'll call your dead relatives on the mortograph. You know what I mean? Like if someone has invented a phone to talk to
Yeah,
dead
yeah.
people, you know, then get dirt on you there. But just little things like that, you know, something they might be like throwaway lines that but you know, all those little things aggregate into this you know, a whole, and you really want to you know, these dualities of things that are spectacular to us and maybe not so spectacular to the characters, you know.
And do you
But it's
expect, sorry, do you expect this book to come out with Pilum as well, or you?
yeah, especially as one Neil's deft hand on
It's
the
guiding
first
you.
draft. Yeah.
Okay.
So
And how long do we have to wait for that?
I hope to have it finished in at least the first draft finished in probably about 6 months, and then we'll see how much work that takes.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
and put it into shape.
Not sure. And then next on the list would be after that would be another Mortu and Kairos, and then hopefully be able to have enough to have a nice sort of Mortu and Kairos collection because those guys have been get a
Yeah,
tremendous.
I can see them. I can see that they've got legs somehow. I could see that being filmed or
Yeah, I mean, it just
cartoon, comics or something.
yeah, whatever was going on, like all the conditions were right in my distracted brain in order to sort of hit on those guys. Is very, very, very lucky with that. They're a great device. They're very fun to write. I'm very, very fond of both characters, and I very much wanted to get to a point where I could comfortably and enthusiastically have serial adventures with a character
Yeah,
or characters, and those two have worked out really, really well for me.
very good. All right, Skylar. We'll call it quits there. I think we've reached our hour or so, more or less. Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
definitely appreciate that. And congratulations on the quality of the writing. And let's see a lot more of it, please, when you're ready.
And thank you for reading those excerpts. It was wonderful to hear them in your
Oh,
voice.
I could reread them. I could fill an hour with them. They're brilliant.
No American can read them now. It's spoiled. Yeah.
Well, either way, we want more of those in all the future volumes that you churn out. So keep going in that style. You can't go wrong.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it so much.
It's not at all. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the show.